You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and I am joined, as always, by your co-host, Kevin. Alex, unfortunately, is not going to be able to make it with us tonight. He's got some traveling going, but we'll have him back real soon. Kevin, how you doing tonight?
I am awesome. We are less than 48 hours away from the NFL draft. I am super stoked, not only for the draft, but because then Dynasty kicks off and you have your rookie drafts. Lots and lots of fun happening. News still trickling in. I wouldn't say it's flying off the shelves, but there's definitely a little bit of news floating around. A lot of interesting projections, a lot of mock drafts flying around out there. Everybody trying to get their take out, but it's fun, and we are here. Next time you see us, it will be live on draft night. So I'm super stoked.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are doing anything when it comes to, watching the draft, anything like that, we are teaming up with the Fantasy First Rounders Live and doing a live stream for the NFL draft. Make sure that you are hopping in, tuning in, checking us out. It's going to be a blast. We did a mock draft with those guys a couple weeks ago, and decided that we enjoyed it so much we needed to team up again. We've got some great guests coming your way, and so it's going to be a night of fun. We're going to start off about 5:45, local time, which is 7:45 Eastern time there, and about 15 minutes before the draft kicks off, and we're going to go with you all the way until the draft ends. It will be an absolute blast. Make sure that you guys are tuning in and checking out. I can't wait. I've been just giddy with excitement waiting for this one. It is going to be a lot of fun. But good.
No, I agree. It'll be a lot of fun. Big, it's a good cast of characters, if you will. We'll have a lot of fun, take some pot shots. I'm sure there'll be some, a little bit of friendly confrontation, if you will, over agreements or disagreements with picks. And you guys will be able to see how we're going to format that. Obviously, if you guys have been kind of paying attention to the show, or especially last week when we had Robbie on, we're big fans of Sports Me. And we're going to be doing a lot of takes based off of the content and the discussions that happen here. We're going to carry that over to get everybody involved. So it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of information flying at you. So if you get tired of listening to the same three people talk on ESPN or the same 3 or 4 people talk on NFL Network, kick it over here. We'll have a whole array of people on, and change it up a bit, make it a little spicy for you.
Yeah, absolutely. This one I can absolutely I'm just super excited. Thursday cannot come fast enough in my book. It is going to be a whole lot of fun, but we still have a great episode for you tonight. Make sure, if you haven't done so already, give us a follow on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. At Good Old Boys FF. The YouTube channel is the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Find us there. And we've also got the Twitch channel for you at Good Old Boys FF. Make sure that you are subscribed, follow, so that you don't miss any of that action coming for you on the live stream. We'll be going on we'll be going on Facebook. I'm sorry. We'll be going on YouTube, Twitter, and for you, so that'll be a blast. But let's go ahead and get on over into the news. And like you already alluded to there, Kevin, not a ton of news really happening this week, which again is a good thing this time of year. But we did have some trades happen, so that's always interesting. The Steelers and the Bears exercised some fifth-year options on some former first-round picks. The Steelers exercising the fifth-year option on Minkah Fitzpatrick. The Bears exercising the fifth-year option on Roquan Smith. The Dolphins and the Washington football team trade Eric Flowers, and then they swap first-round. What a miss. Muted.
Glitching. Late rounds, not first rounds.
I'm sorry. Yep, I did write that and just missed it. My bad, y'all. Thanks for the catch there. The Chiefs traded the 31st overall, a third rounder and a fourth rounder, and then a 2022 fifth rounders to the Ravens for Orlando Brown Jr., a second rounder, and a 2022 sixth rounder. The Eagles coach also coming out this last week saying that the quarterback position is going to be an open competition heading into camp this year. Kevin, what was your thoughts around the news?
I guess first and foremost, Roquan Smith for the Bears, absolute no-brainer. He was a guy that when he came out 4 years ago, I was pounding the table for the Broncos to try and find a way. Like, we are so linebacker starved here in Denver at the moment that he was the guy I wanted the Broncos to go get. He didn't actually fall to the Broncos that year, and for them to move up would have been too much of a reach at that point. So super happy for Roquan. He will forever be a dog in my heart, and did a lot of things for the University of Georgia. So I love following him. Minkah Fitzpatrick. Here's the crazy thing about Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's been with the Pittsburgh Steelers for about a year and a half. And most people forget that he ever played in Miami. And the funny thing is, when that trade happened, the Steelers actually got fried a little bit. Like, why are you giving up a first-round pick for this guy? And he came to Pittsburgh and really helped cement the back half of that defense. He's a ball hawk. He has that ability he just has a nose for the end zone with the ball in his hands. Like, he's just special to watch. So good for the Steelers, good for Minkah Fitzpatrick. That was kind of cool. The Dolphins Washington trade, there's got to be more to this that hasn't been brought to life yet, or brought to the surface yet, because in all regards, Eric Flowers is going to start for the Washington Redskins. And all they did, the football team. And then all they're doing is swapping late round picks. Now, that could be, a fifth for a seventh or something like that, incentive based, depending on performance, that type of thing. But what the Dolphins also did was they just restructured Eric Flowers' contract last week. So what it was, they signed before the 2020 season, they signed him to a 3-year, $30 million deal. Then they just restructured it to go from a $9 million cap hit. They restructured it, so they paid out a $6 million bonus to him 2 days ago, I believe it was. And all the Washington football team has to do is pay the last $3 million. $3 million for a starting guard. Like, there's something about this trade that just makes me scratch my head a little bit. Like, I don't quite understand it. The Washington made out like a bandit. They move back late round picks, whoop-de freaking do, and they get a starting offensive lineman to help out, whether it's Ryan Fitzpatrick or Heineke, whoever's going to be the starting quarterback there, but they help cement that offensive line, so good for them. But the deal of the week was the Chiefs. The Chiefs getting Orlando Brown is huge. As I'm pretty sure everyone knows, they ran into massive offensive line issues in the AFC Championship game, really throughout the playoffs, which finally caught up to them in the Super Bowl when they lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Then they didn't bring back Eric Fisher, and they didn't bring back, I believe, Schwartz, the center, right? Because they switched everybody around, so they didn't bring back their center. And they didn't bring back Eric Fisher, who had started all but 3 games for them since they drafted him. And they bring in Orlando Brown Jr., who was unhappy in Baltimore, and everything he has been saying since being traded to Kansas City, he's putting a lot of gusto and excitement behind that trade. So we'll see if he can own up to that on the field, but he is super excited to be there. He's super excited to be blocking for Patrick Mahomes and being a part of probably the most prolific and dynamic offense in the NFL today.
Yeah, the one that was a little interesting to me, though, too, was the fact that you had Sirianni coming out saying that the the quarterback position is going to be an open competition out there in Philadelphia when they just traded away the guy that really could compete for that one. You look at it, you bring in Joe Flacco to try and push and compete with Jalen Hurts for a starting job. And, quite frankly, the guy that lost the job to Drew Lock, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh my, yep, let's go on this one and sign up for that ride. I don't know. Like, this is one of those that it doesn't make sense to me when when you're the leader of a franchise and a leader of an organization, why you come out and just put some doubt out there as to who the guy is going to be. You sit there and you plant your flag on that hill and you move on. Because unless you're going to take a quarterback early on, what are you doing?
It's Philadelphia, and they can't help but piss and moan no matter what they're doing. Sorry, Eagles fans, but I think most true Philadelphia fans realize it. Like, they're pretty picky. Like, and we all as sports fans have a vested interest in our teams and how they do it. But what the hell? Like, you don't have a quarterback on the roster currently. Free agent period, I guess the bulk of it has passed, right? There's still going to be signings after the draft and fill in roster spots and everything else, but you're not going to find a guy out there to just fill in and all of a sudden compete with Jalen Hurts. Like, Joe Flacco and Jalen Hurts have such different skill sets that how do you even truly measure a competition at that level? Like, Flacco might throw the ball slightly better because he can dissect defenses a half a second faster. Okay, that's fine. Well, when Jalen Hurts gets pressured, he can scramble and pick up 35. So, I mean, which would you rather have? The young, energetic quarterback who really kind of rejuvenated that Eagles team towards the tail end of the season, or Joe Flacco, who has bounced around between 3 teams in the last 3 years and, quite frankly, it looks older than what he is, and really, I don't even know that he quite deserves to be on the NFL roster at this point, compared to some of the youth and talent that's coming up in the ranks.
Yeah. Yep. It'll be interesting to see what they do. It, makes me even more curious what they've got planned for number 12 in the draft, when they draft number 12 here in a couple of days. So, it'll be very interesting to see how that comes to play. Very excited about Orlando Brown getting the chance to really play left tackle, which he did a very good job last year, filling in over there in Baltimore. Yeah, that's one of those that it'll be interesting to see too what Baltimore does here in a couple of days when you're talking about the draft and talking about addressing that line, because Orlando Brown was a big anchor point on that team as well and had been for the last couple of years. So I think that they very much cemented the fact that they're going to be looking to draft a lineman with at least one of those picks coming up here. And you know what? I know a guy that just mocked that they would do that on our last mock. So Kevin had that pick, and I think you have Alex Leatherwood going there if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, now Leatherwood played center at Alabama, but he has guard tendencies, so that'll help fill in some of that. I don't know that he's the most natural fit to fill the gap that the Ravens need, but offensive line is one of those positions that the hit rate on offensive linemen is so much higher than it is on skill position players, so it's a safer pick as far as leading towards production on the field. And B, these interior linemen, you want guys who can swing from center to guard and inside and outside a little bit. So he does provide a little bit of flex there that, quite frankly, every team needs. And where Baltimore's picking, unless they package both first-round picks to move up, which I don't see happening. That's not their MO. I think Leatherwood's probably the right guy that they're going to take there at the end of the first round now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that pick, and I think that's the way that they'll go. Speaking of the draft, we're going to do a little segment on the draft tonight where we're talking, the risers and the fallers as far as draft stock goes, and that's where we'll go ahead and head on over to. So, Kevin, before we went on to the on the air tonight and talking this one through, we were talking, it'd be, a fun little idea to try and talk about, whose draft stock has really risen over the last, couple of weeks, couple of days here leading up to this, whose draft stock has really kind of fallen here, and, really make some interesting thoughts here as you're heading into Thursday and heading into draft day. So let's go ahead and kick it back over to you. Who is your biggest riser when it comes to the NFL draft here in a couple of days?
If this plays out the way that so many people in the industry think it will, the biggest riser has to be Mac Jones, right? Like, he's a guy that 3 weeks ago, people weren't even talking about him in the first round. Like, you had the big four, and then Mac Jones might fall to the Patriots, or a team might trade back up at the end of the first round to get that fifth-year option on a quarterback. And he has gone from kind of that that first, second round swing grade that a lot of players get all the way up to number 3, because it appears that the San Francisco 49ers, that he's their guy, which right, wrong, or indifferent is just kind of Jimmy Garoppolo 2.0 in a lot of different ways. But you know what? If that's what Kyle Shanahan thinks he needs to do to try and get the 49ers back to the Super Bowl, then far be it from me to tell someone like Kyle Shanahan he's doing his job wrong.
Fair enough. What about fallers? Who do you got that's, so far their draft capital isn't necessarily holding like we had expected even a month ago?
So I'm gonna group some folks in together, because I think, especially in our fantasy football industry, right, we get super excited about skill position players and where they're gonna go and where they can make the biggest impact and what they can do. The biggest fallers are all receivers outside of the top 3. Now, the top 3 being Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase. Everybody outside of that, I don't know. I think the prop bet that Vegas has right now, Derek, we were talking about this before the show. I'm pretty sure the prop bet that Vegas has right now is 5.5 receivers in the first round. I think I'm very comfortable hammering the under on that. I wouldn't be surprised to see Rashard Bateman be the 4th receiver taken out of that group. But then to find a 5th anymore of guys that these teams think that they absolutely have to have them, or if they can wait another round, maybe later, and get someone who's similar enough. The more I think about it, the more I'm kind of buying into this concept that after the big 3 for receivers, the Rashard Batemans, the kid from Florida, and
Kadarius Toney.
Yes, and then Rondale Moore out of Purdue. All those 3 guys who have all been flirting with first round grades, I think they're all going in the second round. Like, Bateman's the one that I truly see as the 4th, and then after that, as good as Moore is, I don't know that people are going to tender that first round grade on him for a slot receiver, right? And that's what a lot of this is. Like, you have your top guys and talent for a Devonta Smith or a Jalen Waddle, who could probably, play some slot, play outside, and they have a little bit of flexibility. Jamar Chase is an outside receiver. Like, he's going to play, most likely he's going to play the X when he gets up and going. Like, he has the skill sets to be a true dominant number 1 receiver. But outside of that, we have a lot of guys who are filling that slot type of role, which is needed in today's NFL game. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think these NFL teams as a whole are prioritizing slot receiver over let's build from the trenches, let's get another piece for the defense, let's do that, as opposed to where they can wait another round or 2 and pick up a receiver that's similar and far more comparable than the fall off on the defensive side of the ball after about the first 2 rounds.
Fair enough. Terrence Marshall would be another guy that we had seen kind of flirted with potentially being a first round guy in there as well, to kind of lump him in with those wide receivers you were just talking about as well. And I think you're right. I think, it could be very interesting because of the fact that they've set that line there. But, really after you get past those first three, the rest of those guys, there's, when we talk fantasy all the time, we talk about the tiers. Well, there's a very clear tier break and those next group of guys there to the point where it could very well see them fall out of the first round. So, Mac Jones, agree with you too, that he is the riser faller. I did find it interesting though, that Kyle Shanahan coming out with, some press clippings, in the last couple of days saying that, he's very confident at any of the 5 quarterbacks that, he could take at number 3, which is probably a good thing if you just gave up as much as the Niners did to move up, which again, they're a team that you don't normally see spend a lot of future draft capital to move up in a draft. They're normally a team that will, trade away some capital, move back a little bit. So I would say, yes, he's, that statement holds pretty true, but it'll be very interesting to me to see who they take at number 3. And I think that's really where the intrigue of this draft starts. And so, the question then becomes is, I'm right there with you thinking that 5 quarterbacks would take in the first round, but are we going to see 5 quarterbacks taken in the top 10 picks?
Man, because everyone is saying yes, I almost have to say no to go against the grain, right? That one of them is going to fall outside the top 10. I just, you think of the other guys who will go up there, right? Kyle Pitts,
Sewell, and Slater.
Penny Sewell, Rashawn Slater. So there's 3. And then
Jamar Chase probably in there too.
Jamar Chase is in there. So there's 4. Number 5. I mean, there has to be a defensive player. Pick one, whether you're going corner or linebacker or defensive line. It doesn't matter at that point, right? Whether it's whether it's Horn, Fitzpatrick, right, has been rumored at 10 to Dallas a lot. So there's that 10th pick. So then you're only looking for one team. Maybe they move up, maybe some other things happen, but 5 out of the top 10 just seems like a lot, man. And everybody's saying, yeah, they think that's going to happen, or at least most everybody's saying they think that's going to happen. I think I'm going to go against the grain on this. One of the 5 is going to fall. And it just seems written in the NFL stars, as much as it disgusts me, that somehow the New England Patriots are going to get their quarterback of the future by sitting where they're at and have one fall into their lap at 15. Like, that just seems like it's written in the stars, and it makes me want to vomit. But the more I think about it, it's just seems like it's almost written in stone already.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw some things earlier today too, where the Patriots came out kind of saying that the groundwork has been laid for them to move up potentially to the number 8 and do a swap. Potentially moving inside the top 10 to try and take a quarterback would be the assumption there. Same thing too. Atlanta is rumored to potentially be moving back for a team that's hungry to get a quarterback and move up to that number 4 spot. So I guess the question that I have for you, if you had to put the likelihood of the Falcons trading out and the likelihood of the Panthers trading out, what would you put the likelihood of each of those scenarios?
I think the likelihood of the Falcons trading out is probably, if we're going to put a value to it, let's call it 40%. So less than likely, but well within the realm of possibilities. I think the Panthers are even less. I think the Panthers have a lot of holes that they need to fill, and they'll be pretty happy if they can get their hands on an offensive lineman. If Kyle Pitts falls to them, they'll be happy. Like, unless they get offered a absolute haul from a team in, the mid part of this draft where they can get a first this year, a first next year, maybe, and a second rounder or something like that to really make it worth their while, I don't see the Panthers trading out. They have too many holes. You take best available at that point. It really doesn't matter position-wise. You just take the best player available because he'll be able to fill a gap that the Panthers need. But it's draft day, and the NFL draft is always full of a couple surprises. So maybe that's it. So Panthers 15%, the Falcons 40%, and we'll see who has the gusto to try and give it all up to move up and get their guy.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those that when I look at some of the followers as well from a draft day perspective, it's an interesting one, and it's one that I've never really seen before. Where normally if a guy is tumbling down the draft boards, or you're seeing the stock fall as far as his draft day capital is concerned, you usually have a good reason why it, or at least a good narrative for it. And a guy that I haven't ever seen this really with before is a guy like Justin Fields, who, not long ago, it was, the question mark was really the Jets going to take it at number 2. It looks, things look like they're going to go with Wilson there. And then it was obviously whoever didn't get picked second was going to be picked number 3 there. And that doesn't even seem to hold true anymore when you look at this. So, kind of an interesting narrative there when you're looking at it, that Justin Fields, who a lot of people had right after that, the college playoff, championship game and, playoffs, had him as the number 2 quarterback prospect coming into this thing. There's a lot of mocks that I've seen come out recently that have him the 5th quarterback being taken off the board, even behind Trey. So, any thoughts as to what's going on with Justin Fields there?
I think part of it's smoke and mirrors. I think part of it is the stigma around Ohio State quarterbacks. They just really haven't performed well in the NFL. They've had a lot of shortcomings, if you will, for one reason or the other. But just to watching the film and the level of competition that Justin Fields played against while at Ohio State, and even while at Georgia before he transferred up, he is still the second best quarterback in this draft. He has the most dynamic skill set in this draft. And I'd argue that, quite frankly, maybe even more so than Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence has that moxie of Clemson, right? He won the national title. He was in the national title. He was in the national title again. He had the accolades and being able to do these things while under Dabo at Clemson. But Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence have been competing with and against each other since junior high. They grew up around the same area. They went to the same quarterback camps. They were recruited by the same schools. There's a natural competition there. They're friends. They're friendly. But there is a natural competition there. And Justin Fields, up until the day that Trevor Lawrence started at Clemson, Justin Fields had always been regarded as the better quarterback. Trevor Lawrence won more at Clemson. Okay, that's fine. But, there have been some really good quarterbacks on some really crappy teams before. And Justin Fields wasn't on crappy teams. He just was on teams that couldn't quite get over that national title hump. But I think so. All that long-winded, and I apologize, but all that I think plays into it. I don't think Justin Fields is the quarterback that falls. I think Trey Lance is the quarterback that falls still. I think there's just too much unknown about him, and for NFL teams to invest such a high and, I guess, wealthy pick being in the top 10, I think they want to be able to check off a couple more boxes than, well, he looked good for 16 games, and, the one game that he played last fall looked okay, but he really hasn't played football in 8 months now. And we've seen these other guys as recently as January. So I think Trey Lance is the one that falls still. I think there's too many unknowns, not to Lance's fault. He did what he could against the competition he faced and the schedule that he had. But I think NFL teams are very cautious with these first round picks, and as many of them that do bust out, I as far as washing out of the league, I think teams are really trying to take some of the uncertainty out of it.
I think you're probably right. But yeah, it'll make for a lot of intrigue, and for everybody out there, watching and you're hearing some of our takes on our risers and our fallers. Make sure you're taking some notes on that, because on Thursday, if we got one right or we got one wrong, I want you to hit us up in the chat on the live stream, and make sure that you hold us accountable and let us know what we got right and what we got wrong. But let's go ahead and move on over to some fantasy trades. And that is kind of one of the staples out there when you're talking fantasy football and things that can make and break a season, is being able to make, not only good draft picks, but also make a really good, trades throughout the season to get your team better and be able to really rise up and do what you need to do to win a championship there. And so for anybody out there listening, if you didn't get a chance to hit us up with some draft day or with some trades for your fantasy football, you can throw it in the chat. We'd love to interact with you. Love to hear your trades. You can throw them up there. We'll talk about them and go through all of that. Just make sure you throw it in the comment section, and we'll go through that. But let's go ahead and start with some dynasty trades that we had sent in. And the first one up was Ezekiel Elliott and a 2021 first. It happens to be the 106 for the 2021 101. What are your thoughts on this one? So it's Zeke in the 106 for the 101 this year.
There's a couple caveats to this, and I'll list them through. One, if this is a super flex, that would change my mind from what I'm going to say to the other way. And also depending on roster construction, right? If this is a super flex, we'll start there, and you need the quarterback, you got it. As much as it's painful at times, you got to take Trevor Lawrence at 101. And especially if you're needy at quarterback. Now, if you're not, or if it's just a single quarterback league, I'm taking Zeke in the 106 all day long. I will let, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Travis Etienne, maybe Najee Harris. That's a bit of a stretch, but I'm sure it's going to happen in some leagues. Fall to me at 106 and pair that up with Zeke and run with it, as opposed to the 101. Now, again, if you need a quarterback, if it's a super flex league, take Trevor Lawrence, and feel good about that. You got the best quarterback in the draft. It's a position of need on your team. But if you don't need a quarterback in a super flex league, trade the 101. You're getting in my opinion, you're getting a top 5 running back in Zeke, who's still only 25 years old. Like, yes, he had a crap year last year. Every Cowboy had a crap year after Dak went out. Like, get over it. That was last year. That's this year. The offensive line's coming back. I'm sure they're doing. I'm sure they're going to draft an offensive lineman at some point in this draft to start fill the holes. Dak's healthy again. CeeDee Lamb's another year into it. Michael Gallup's playing in a contract year. You have Amari Cooper there, but let Zeke be Zeke. I'm not giving up hope on him yet, and I would much rather take a proven commodity and gamble on the 106 than not have any commodity at all and gamble on the 101.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was looking at this as well, because, just like a couple of weeks ago when we hit up the Cowboys and we're talking about that team makeup in 2021 before the draft, I'm right there with you. I think that Zeke will have a big bounce back year. When you look at it, before Dak went down, he was the number 2 or number 3 running back, depending upon whether you're playing full point or half point PPR. And the 106 will still get you a really good prospect in this draft. Depending upon the league makeup, you're talking either one of those, the word generational talent gets, dropped quite a bit, but one of those type of elite level or potential elite level wide receivers out there, you could potentially have one of those running backs fall to you. And if you're talking, single QB, you've still got a great prospect in some of these quarterbacks falling to you. So I like the Zeke and the 106 side more myself. Let's go ahead and move on over to the next trade. And that one was Michael Gallup and a 2021 third rounder for Terry McLaurin and actually, I'm sorry, I got those mixed up. Michael Gallup and a 2021 fourth rounder for Terry McLaurin and a 2021 third rounder.
Last year at this point, I would have given a different answer. This year, and seeing how all this is playing out, I want Terry McLaurin over Michael Gallup. So I don't know that it's that close as much as I wanted it to be last year. Gallup kind of fell short, obviously, with Dak going down. Terry McLaurin's been the clear option. He's been a bigger target. He's had bigger target percentage games than what I anticipated him to have last year, with really no quarterback consistently throwing the ball down the field. And then once Alex Smith came down, he's captain check down. But Terry McLaurin made it work. The emergence or the new signee of Curtis Samuel doesn't scare me at all. I think it probably helps Terry McLaurin more than it hurts him. Ryan Fitzpatrick loves to throw the ball down the field. He loves to gamble. And this is a situation where I'd rather take a team's true number one than a team's really good 2B.
Yeah, kind of a ditto answer for me. Last year, this time, I would have rather had Gallup going into a contract year over Terry McLaurin and that quarterback situation they had where it was going to be Dwayne Haskins. Alex Smith wasn't it really wasn't thought that, that Alex Smith would come back. So you're staring down the Dwayne Haskins train there. Michael Gallup had the much better quarterback, was going into the contract year. So yeah, before the season, I would have rather have had the Michael Gallup side. Looking back, hindsight, I would much rather have had the Terry McLaurin side. Let's go ahead and move on into the next trade. And I'm kind of noticing a trend here, but you had a lot of trades for Zeke happening last year. So this one was Zeke and the 2021 third rounder for Kenyan Drake and Kenny Golladay.
I'm, again, going to lead on the Zeke Elliott side. He is a guy, again, top 5 running back. He still finished in the top. He still was an RB1 last year, guys. Like, yes, he sputtered down the stretch, but he's still an RB1. And you pick up a third-round pick. Okay, well, Drake's not even worth a third-round pick these days because he's playing second fiddle to Josh Jacobs in Las Vegas. Kenny Golladay, while a number 1 wide receiver, we're not quite sure how that's going to work with Daniel Jones. I have high aspirations for it, but it's a new system. It's a new offensive philosophy. He's playing with the new quarterback who he doesn't have chemistry with. All those things. And Galladay's actually a year older than Zeke. Now, receivers last longer than running backs do, but he's just coming off a season where he missed 80% of the games because of injuries. And you're not quite sure how he's going to fit into this New York scheme. So, again, I'm taking Zeke. And the players are nice for some depth. Galladay's a nice piece. Again, I like him a lot, but I'm taking the running back. Those are a more valuable commodity in the fantasy realm than a wide receiver.
This one for me is, again, last year at this time, I very well might have looked at taking the Drake and the Golladay side of things, just because of the fact that where we were this time last year on Kenyan Drake, coming off of that fantastic season, finishing in 2019, and where the expectations were for him to be almost a top 12 back going into 2020, and Kenny Golladay coming off that great season in 2019 and potentially being going up and looking at another realm of being able to, you're talking a top 12 wide receiver as well. So before the season, I might have leaned the Drake, Kenny Golladay side. After the season, I'm certainly taking the Zeke in the 2021 third, simply because I'm looking at the potential of Zeke being another top 5 back. I don't think that you're going to see that with Drake, and Golladay is a big question mark, changing locations again. Let's go ahead and move on over to the next one. CeeDee Lamb for a 2021 pick, and it's the 105 pick. So CeeDee Lamb for the 105. That's 2.
Damn it. I'm taking CeeDee Lamb here. I think for the 105 in most drafts, you're going to be looking at receiver at that point, and whether that's a Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, pick your flavor at that point. But CeeDee Lamb is a guy who is clearly going to be the Dallas Cowboys' number 1 receiver here in about, if it doesn't happen this year, it's going to happen next. So I'll take Lamb. He's going to be playing. He's, again, proven commodity. We've seen what he's done on the field already. He's electric. The rapport was starting with Dak Prescott, and he was the one Cowboy who really didn't fall off a cliff after Prescott got hurt. So I'm taking Lamb because we've seen him play NFL games against NFL competition, and we know exactly what we're getting with him. To an extent, as opposed to the prospect of we're trying to translate your collegiate tape into the NFL game, and while these guys look really good, the bust factor is real. So I want the proven commodity, only with 1 year under his belt, so he's still super young. Age doesn't play any factor into this for me.
Yeah, same difference for me. Even when you're looking at the 105, there's a good chance you're looking at Jamar Chase or a Devontae Smith or a Jalen Waddle being there. One of the top end wide receivers in this class. But last year at this time, before the draft, we were talking CeeDee Lamb and
Judy.
Yep, Jerry Jeudy being that 1A, 1B, and you were good with either one of those guys, and it was going to be dependent upon where the landing spot was for fantasy, which one was going to be the better commodity and the better player for fantasy. So CeeDee Lamb has probably one of the best landing spots that you could expect a wide receiver to have in the NFL. Dallas throws the ball a ton. They've got a poor defense that is going to result in them getting in shootouts a ton as well. And you've got one of the better quarterbacks in the league to throw him the ball. So, yeah, I'm going to take the guy that has built-in opportunity, being CeeDee Lamb, and a guy that can either go in the slot or play outside and can really do both, and on a team that will utilize him. So CeeDee Lamb for me over the gamble, that would be the 105. So the next ones we're going to talk about are all some redraft here. So redraft from last year, you had Derrick Henry for D.D. Chark, James Robinson, and the Buccaneers defense and special teams.
Derrick Henry. We expected some things out of DJ Chark, right? Like we thought he would take that next step and kind of really compete at that wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 swing area. That didn't come to pass. James Robinson was a nobody at this point last year. We had no idea that he was going to bust onto the scenes in Jacksonville, or that Jacksonville was even going to let go of Leonard Fournette at this point. We still had no idea. So he was buried on the depth chart behind Rockwell, Ozigbo, Leonard Fournette. Then you had James Robinson. This is a Derrick Henry deal all day. You take a top 8 running back, and really he's higher than that, but because he doesn't catch the ball, you kind of downgrade him a little bit. He's still top 8, who gets a ton of usage. We saw the run that he had at the end of 2019. That continued in 2020. There's no reason to think that won't continue in 2021. But, sitting there looking at that, I like receivers. And as far as the defense and special teams goes, get out of here. Stream them. You don't need to trade for one. unless, you're really just swimming in a pot of gold. But at that point, I think you're probably just playing in like an 8-man league. So who gives a damn?
Gotcha. The fact that this was a redraft trade, I have to believe that it happened in season, and certainly depending upon when in season it happened, this one either looked like you gave up a ton or not so much. Because if this happened towards the very tail end of the season, right before you started looking at playoffs, that was right about the time that James Robinson was kind of banged up a little bit. DJ Chark had missed some time in there. But if this was made, say 5, 6, 7 games into the year, you probably saw some really just kind of a pretty fair trade, I think, on that one. But I would have still leaned the Derrick Henry side of things, just because you know how much he was going to get utilized in there, and Tennessee had a game script that is going to allow them to play from ahead and run Henry 20 times a game plus. So I'm right there with you. I like the Derrick Henry side on that one. Next one up was Cam Newton, and this is redraft again. Cam Newton for Sony Michel.
Barf. That's what I'm gonna say is barf. For me, it's Cam Newton. Because I completely believe in the fact that you can't trust New England running backs. Sony Michel was given opportunity, didn't quite capitalize on it. Cam Newton was given opportunity, didn't quite capitalize on it. But if all things are created equal at that point, I want the ball. I want the guy who's going to touch the ball every single play, and that defaults into Cam Newton. Now, neither one showed great. People were very frustrated with performances out of both guys. But I don't trust New England running backs. I don't draft New England running backs. I don't trade for New England running backs. So Cam Newton would be the default piece as far as, what side of that trade I would like if I was forced to make it.
Fair enough. I'm right there with you. I would rather have the Cam Newton side of that. Especially going into the season, because of the fact that you knew what Cam Newton's going to do when they get in the red zone. He is going to score some touchdowns, and he's going to end up vulturing a lot of touchdowns from whoever the running back is there. So yeah, I would have taken the Cam Newton side on that all day and not thought twice about it. Let's go ahead and move on over. We've got one more trade to talk about, and that was Zeke and DJ Moore for DeAndre Hopkins and James Conner in redraft last year.
So I think this one probably depends on the part of the season that you were in, a little bit, right? So DJ Moore started off slow. Zeke started out pretty hot until the Dak injury, and then that kind of flipped. Zeke sputtered down the stretch. DJ Moore actually picked it up and ended up having a career year, like quietly having a career year, and we've still kind of bagged on him for not making that elite jump. Like, I think, like, at least on our show, we were pounding the table that he was going to make. DeAndre Hopkins obviously is a top 3 receiver, in most cases a top 2 receiver, especially in redrafts. So there's a lot of name clout to that. And James Conner had every opportunity in the world, but just couldn't seem to stay healthy, was constantly getting banged up, but while on the field was serviceable. So I see both sides of this. Honestly, I think this is probably, for me, the most even trade across the board. I love me some Zeke Elliott. And as you guys have told, any side of the trade here with Zeke, I've been leaning on that Zeke side, because I just think he has the ability to take over a game. And there's only a handful of running backs that can do that. And yes, depending on the time of the season, maybe you weren't thrilled with Zeke. Maybe someone was trying to unload Zeke. But for all intents and purposes, for a redraft, I probably would have gambled on the Zeke and DJ Moore side, because I couldn't trust James Conner to stay on the field. And I think that's ultimately what tips it in the favor of DJ Moore and Zeke Elliott, is Zeke and DJ are greater than DeAndre Hopkins by himself. And a lot of times that's what you're going to end up with, because you can't trust the history of James Conner to stay healthy.
No, that's pretty spot on there. Yeah, again, depending upon when that trade was made, it definitely kind of sways things there. But I would probably lean towards the Zeke and DJ Moore side of things. I could see it though if you were, looking pretty stout as far as running backs went, or you had some other options in there. Maybe needing a top end wide receiver. I could have seen the or the DeAndre Hopkins side of things, but just on the surface there, I'm probably looking and leaning more towards the DJ Moore and the Zeke side of things as well. So let's go ahead and head on over. We've got a team of the week to still break down, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. Almost said Oakland there, but slowly starting to remember that they're now out there in the desert in Las Vegas. So the Las Vegas Raiders last year, played in that AFC West and really didn't necessarily have the season that I thought a lot of folks were kind of banking on there, planning on seeing a little bit more of a offense, come to play with them, having spent so much capital in the first couple of rounds of the draft on offense, and especially at some skill positions there. And that really just didn't come to fruition there. But let's go ahead and we're going to start where we always do, and that is over in the running back room. And so Josh Jacobs last year finished as running back 8, 273 carries, 1,065 yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, 33 receptions on 45 targets for an additional 238 through the air. What are your thoughts on Josh Jacobs?
It was the ugliest RB8 performance I have ever seen. He got you there at the end of the day, but it was ugly, and the touchdowns made it. And that's okay. Sometimes fantasy seasons rely on that, and that's all part of the game. He finished about where you drafted him, maybe even a little bit higher in some leagues. You might have been able to get him as like the 10th or 11th running back off the board. So when thinking about it that way, he surpassed expectations. But actually watching Josh Jacobs on a weekly basis and then living through the games where he had to sit out, and you watch Devin Booker go wild, and I shouldn't say go wild, but carry the ball. It was a really frustrating RB8 performance. The Raiders just never quite seemed to consistently use him the way that a lot of people feel like they should. Part of it was because they got behind in some games, and they're playing catch up against the Chiefs. They're playing catch up. Well, they beat the Chiefs one game. Then they're playing catch up against the Chargers. They split a series with Denver yet again for the umpteenth year in a row. Like, he shows a lot of really good things. He catches the ball out of the backfield fairly well. He's a guy that needs to get into a rhythm. I think a lot of times that Oakland forgets that, or they just don't script him in for that, 15 to 18 touches to really let him get going. And then you see where the game script is, if he needs to go 20 plus or what that looks like. So Jacobs is, for me, he's right there on that wide receiver, or excuse me, that running back 1, running back 2 kind of cusp. I think I'd be happy with him as an RB2 on my team. I would not be happy with him as my RB1. I really wouldn't. I would go in a different direction. I'd be looking at a DeAndre Swift. I'd be looking at I might be looking at like a Gibson, something in that nature. But Josh Jacobs, while the numbers at the end of the year were there, it was a really ugly way how he got there, and there was zero consistency to his fantasy game, which is what I struggle with out of running backs. I need some consistency out of there, and I just wasn't getting it from him.
Man, 3. I'm real glad nobody put that over under out there today, because that would have been another hit over. So just smash the over. That'll be a fun one when we set the line for that on Thursday. So we had a couple more folks in the mix and all of that. So Anyway, I want y'all to hit us up with the comments on this one. If what you think the over under needs to be for muted mics and false starts for Thursday night. But Josh Jacobs, you're right. He is a guy that was very touchdown dependent last year. And when you looked at his fantasy finishes, he had a couple of really just fantastic weeks and a couple of other weeks that were week losers for you, really. Like if you were relying on him to be that running back one for you, he probably lost you the week. And you look at it, week one, scored a touchdown, finished as running back one overall, scored 3 touchdowns. Week 5, scored 2 touchdowns where he was the 5th overall. Week 9, scored a touchdown where he was the 9th overall. Week 10, 2 touchdowns, 2nd overall. Week 15, touchdown, 12th overall. Week 17, scored 2, and he was the 9th overall. But outside of week 11 where he finished with a touchdown and the running back 15, if he didn't score you a touchdown, he was towards the back half of running back 2 or beyond. There was a lot of weeks he was, running back 43, running back 50, running back 38, running back 31, 31, 25. And those are not deals that you can consistently bank on when you're talking about a running back one there. So when I'm looking forward to this year, I'm probably downgrading Josh Jacobs more than a lot of other people will. And there's still a lot of intrigue for him because he's still a young back, still has that pass catching ability to it. But the fact that they've added some competition there with Kenyan Drake coming in, the fact that the Raiders, I think, again, are going to struggle to really get the establish a run game with it, and the fact that I think he's going to, again, be touchdown dependent, I'm probably thinking that he's going to be, when we start going, he's probably looking running back 15 or 16 going into the season for me. What about you?
Yeah, I just don't see him. I don't see him going any higher than that. It just, going through these game logs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, 6 if you count the one he missed, 6 games of under 60 yards rushing. The games, like you said, Derek, where he fell outside, RB3 territory, it's because he wasn't getting fed the ball. 16 carries, 15 carries, 10, 14, 7, 13, 13. Like, it is hard to justify a top pick for a running back who doesn't see any consistency getting the ball. That is why we value, the CMCs, Saquon, Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook. The list goes on. Derrick Henry, all these guys, they consistently see the ball. Win or lose, you can count on, 17 touches, win or lose. Alvin Kamara might be the slight exception, but he makes up for it on the PPR side because he averages 84 catches a season. So that's where you can make up that ground. The rest of these guys, they need to tote the rock. And the way the Raiders played this out, it just didn't happen for him. Like you said, if he didn't fall in the end zone, you were looking at RB3, RB4 type territory for a guy that you drafted either at the very back end of the first round or the very top end of the second. Guys, he was a season loser, even though he finished RB8. Like, that's how dramatic these swings were, because he was so good on his good weeks and so freaking terrible on the bad weeks that he lost you games that you should have never lost last year. And for that, I'm going to fade him more. I'm going to have to get a substantial value on Josh Jacobs to bring him onto my roster and say, come on, buddy, help me get to the promised land, because I just don't think he can get me there.
So you're talking value, which now you're talking my language when you're talking fantasy and talking draft value. What, where are you looking? Where would he have to fall to for you to go, yep, smash the draft button?
Back into the third, top of the fourth to at least get me. I mean, I guess, and that I don't even know if that's a smash position for me. it's a hard look. It piques my interest, but I don't even know if that's a smash spot. Now, if I'm drafting at the back end of the first round, or excuse me, the back end of the fourth round, hell yeah, I'm smashing it on that point, because the tier break is coming, right? And you're at least going to get a guy who can provide enough upside that you can try and work around it a little bit. You know that he's going to at least see some touches. He's not going to put up, goose eggs as he goes out there, but he's also a guy that I don't feel comfortable drafting in the first 3 rounds. I just see value in other places. Switching positions, go to receiver. I can pick up a receiver in the second and third and then go back to running back in the fourth, because people are going to shoot me for this, but bear with me. If I draft Melvin Gordon, although he is not going to finish RB8, he has a baseline that can provide a mid RB2, stable for me. I can make up the upside in other places and be happy with it, because I can bank on the points that a Melvin Gordon would get me week in and week out. And so it's kind of how you feel like building your team, right? Like, yeah, I get the high weeks of Josh Jacobs, but I get some really dog turd weeks too. Or do I want to take a little bit safer approach, make sure I don't miss, right? You can't win a draft with your first 4 rounds, but you can lose one. And this is a spot where, do you take the gamble that early, or do you save it and maybe you bank on something where you're gambling in like the 7th, 8th, 9th round, where you can absorb some of the pitfalls of a player having a down week and still reap all the benefits of having those boom weeks. So that's kind of where I'm feeling Josh Jacobs at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think as far as putting the where he's a value at in the draft, I think you probably handicapped that pretty well, and that's about where I would be looking for him as well. He's a guy that when you're talking even 3rd, 4th round type of deal, there's a lot of other running backs that I think I'd rather have in that spot, even up to and including a Joe Mixon. Granted, that's I'm a much bigger fan of Joe Mixon than a lot of folks out there. But he's a guy right now that you can easily get in the 4th round in a lot of leagues as far as they're shaping up. And Josh Jacobs is a guy that's still being taken, as a top 15, 16 running back in a lot of cases, which would put him in a second round type of position to a, very early 3rd. And that's still about too far up for me. Again, that's, just like you said, that's a one that has the potential to lose you the draft on that one. So
here's, while we're on him real quick, and then we can move on. I know we're kind of going through this. Here are the guys that are being drafted after Josh Jacobs, just current ADP. James Robinson. Okay, I can see that. Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, Austin Eckler, Cam Akers, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, J.K. Dobbins.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to take every one of those guys over Josh Jacobs. Maybe not David Montgomery, but
Montgomery finishes RB4 last year.
I'm well aware of where he finished. But for me, it's one of those that I don't see them having that similar. It was one of those that for Montgomery last year, he had that deal where he had both opportunity and a very weak schedule all come together at the same time. And he just managed to, and good for him, because not many players, even when they have a ton of opportunity and a very weak schedule, not all of them produce at that same level. And he killed it during that back half of that season and that week. But I don't see him the lightning striking twice.
Okay, fair enough. So let me know.
I just see him moving a little bit.
Okay, so Montgomery is, so you said everybody except Montgomery. Okay, so now let's find out some of the rest of these, and just stop me when you find a guy that you would draft Jacobs in front of. Chris Carson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Montgomery's probably the line. Like it's probably a coin flip when I get to that one.
Okay.
The rest of those guys, I like
Fair
all
enough.
of their upside better, is where that comes down to. And they're guys
So
that I
you're
can
looking.
also.
So ADP wise, you're looking middle of the third round, just to give you context.
Yeah. Yep. Which I could see potentially, taking a swing on him in there. But again, if I've got some of those other options, because you named some options out there, like an Akers, Joe Mixon's a guy that Joe Mixon's a guy you can typically wait on the fourth round right now. And that'd probably be where I'd go. But there's a lot of other names that you called out there that I would be more willing to take a swing on, and put them on as let's be honest. If I'm drafting the third round, that's my third running back I'm putting on the team. So, those are guys that I would rather have in the flex because, like you said, they're going to give me a more solid baseline, but they're also going to give me more upside, I think, as well. So, just more consistency. And you know how I put together teams where it's a high floor type of team. That's the way that I'm going to go. So, cool. Let's go ahead and move on over to Mr. Ken Drake, Kenyan Drake coming over from Arizona after last year. He finished as running back 14 last year, had 239 carries, 955 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, 25 receptions on 31 targets for 137 through the air. What are your thoughts on Kenyan Drake?
Kenyan Drake was a more consistent running back than Josh Jacobs was last year. It seems like John Gruden as a whole wants to go towards a more dual running back approach, which is completely contrary to what he said at this time last year, right? They were pounding the table that Josh Jacobs can be a workhorse back and we can use him in all three downs and we can use him in all these different scenarios and we can do this and this and this. And none of it happened. So they're bringing Drake in. Drake might be a little bit better of a receiver out of the backfield, so that helps him with some of those situations. While there is a drop off from Jacobs to Drake talent wise, it's probably not as steep as most people want to believe. But it gives them the option of, if Jacobs gets dinged up, here's a guy that can come in. He's a great spell back, that can pick up an offense. And be able to run with it. He has a way of finding his way into the end zone. Like you said, 10 touchdowns last year. So Drake is a good piece for the Las Vegas Raiders. It makes some of the drafting fantasy wise around this Raiders backfield a little more dicey, if you will, which is probably part of the reason why I will wait even longer on Josh Jacobs. To see what this kind of split looks like and if it's going to be a true timeshare, if it's going to be something more of like a 65-35 or 60-40, something like that. But Drake's not a bad back. He's not a great back. He's not he had that great end to 2019. He wasn't a bad back last year in 2020. He didn't hit the high notes that everyone thought he might hit, but then again, he finished about where you drafted him. So you can't be too upset with that. So it's going to be interesting to see how this dynamic works. Jacobs is a little bit more of a bowling ball. Drake has maybe a little bit more elusiveness to his game. Is definitely more of kind of a one cut and go guy. Jacobs seemingly wants to plow you over, but does a great job doing it. Don't get me wrong. So Drake, I picture it much like the Cleveland Browns run their backfield. Is you have Josh Jacobs, who's the poor man's Nick Chubb, kind of taking first and second down work most of the time. Every once in a while, Drake will come in and spell that. But then you get into passing situations. You probably won't see Jacobs involved in as many situations passing wise, but you'll see that's where Drake will make up his fantasy point value. And I still think Drake's going to finish as an RB2. Like all this said and done, I think Drake will finish in the top 24 because of how he will be used in the passing game. So realistically, if you can get him in, the 7th round or so. That for where he's going to finish, guys, that's a bargain. And that's okay. Just beware that situation will be fluid. I don't think John Gruden's going to be married to either one of these guys. So if one of them struggles, they're going to probably get a quick hook, and he's going to give the other guy a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right on that one. And you're right. It was one of those that last year, looking at it, these guys were drafted back to back. Josh Jacobs was drafted as the RB10 off the board in last year, and Kenyan Drake was drafted as RB11 off the board this year. Or I'm sorry, going into last year. So one of those, I think you summarized that pretty good. Where Kenyan Drake's going to be more of the passing down back. You're going to see Josh first and second down back, and yeah, I've just got to kind of go with ditto on that one because you summarized it so good. I don't know that I've got anything, spellbinding to really go off of. So let's go ahead and move on over into the wide receivers. And this is kind of an interesting group now with some of the additions that they've made in this last offseason. Yes. So Henry Ruggs III was the first wide receiver taken in last year's draft, not one that most people were thinking of, but the Raiders do love speed and drafted him as the first RB off the last year in the NFL draft. Now, last season for fantasy, he finished as the 89th wide receiver, 26 receptions on 43 targets, 452 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. They rushed him 9 times for 49 yards. What are your thoughts on Henry Ruggs III?
If you want to, I don't know what to think about Henry Ruggs, honestly. He wasn't the wide receiver that I liked out of last year's draft. We talked about that. Yes, he's fast, but what else does he bring to the table? If he's going to be Deshaun Jackson-esque, okay, that's fine, but you have to have a quarterback who can put the ball in his hands down the field. And it didn't really happen. I mean, you're only seeing 46 targets. I think the lack of offseason and NFL preparation really stunted his growth. So it will be interesting to see what happens for him in this upcoming season. But Henry Ruggs is, at this point, nothing more than like a wide receiver 4 at best. You're taking a flyer on him later to hope he pops and you can capture some of that touchdown upside. He's a best ball candidate, in my opinion, like a guy that you can get in best ball leagues where you don't have to worry about him every week and capitalize on, when he's able to, go, 3 receptions for 120 yards and a touchdown. Hey, it's a great best ball week, but you can't bank on that. So I'm avoiding him. I don't need a Las Vegas Raider wide receiver on my team. But it will be interesting to at least study his jump from year 1 to year 2 and see if the offseason helps him.
Yeah, that was one of those that it was actually really interesting to look at from the standpoint of how much draft capital they invested in Henry Ruggs to only utilize him, 43 targets going his way. So that was one of those I was very interested to see that one come to play on how that looked. Fantasy wise, he had one game where he popped and was wide receiver 9 on the week, but that 1 week garnered him a fourth of his total production all season long. So is another guy that I'm not looking to put on my roster. I think you hit it right though with the best ball type of tag. I think there is some value there.
Yeah, he's got to get healthy, and you got to see any sort of consistency target wise, right? He 2 games with 5 targets, and the rest were 4 or less. Didn't have a single game with more than 3 receptions. Why the hell are you drafting a guy in the first round for an average of 2.5 targets per game, or 3 targets per game, roughly, and 2 receptions? What in the world? Less than 2 receptions. So what in the world's the point of drafting him in the first round? Like, he has the talent. It was a bad year for him, but because of that, I'm going to fade and make him prove that he can develop before I even bother looking at him.
Yeah, right there with you. John Brown is now on the Raiders coming over from Buffalo. And John Brown last year had some injury troubles while he was in Buffalo there, but he finished as the 80th wide receiver for fantasy. 33 receptions, 52 targets, 458 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
You're breaking up there,
Pretty
but
darn close is the point. I said I felt like I ran about the same stat line for both Henry Ruggs and John Brown, and the reason is because they were utilized about the same way. So it's an interesting thing where the Raiders go out and get an older version of Henry Ruggs to bring in and try and stretch the field. What are your thoughts on
yes,
old John Brown?
I think it's exactly the same. They're exactly the same guy. Henry Ruggs, 6 foot. John Brown, 5'11. Henry Ruggs, 185. John Brown, 180. Henry Ruggs, 1 year of experience. John Brown, 7. Like, that's the difference. Is just seeing defenses more. John Brown in 2019 had a very good year. That kind of put him back on the map for Buffalo, but then the injury bug hit. Diggs came into Buffalo, and that kind of went by the wayside. So it's a very poor man attempt of trying to keep up with the Chiefs, is what this looks like, right? You don't have anybody who can be Tyreek Hill, but if you can just get guys past the secondary, maybe they can get those explosive plays. The problem is, to hit those explosive plays, you have to use your running back, and we've already talked about how they don't do that. So this whole offensive philosophy is skewed. I don't like it. I don't think it works. I think they're going to be struggling to get out of third or fourth place in the AFC West for a while, as long as they continue to implement this. It's nothing against John Brown. I trust him at this point more than Henry Ruggs, because at least he has some sort of track record that he will find ways to make plays with the ball in his hand. He's seen a couple more defenses, maybe a couple more tricks up his sleeve to get open a little bit. But at some point, the Las Vegas Raiders have to find someone who can run the short and intermediate route with success, whose name is not Darren Waller. And they currently don't have that guy on this roster.
No. It would have been interesting to see what that looked like last year had John Brown been able to stay healthy. But the fact that he was kind of in and out last year on that good Buffalo team, and that Buffalo team didn't really miss much with him not out there. Like I said, he's a guy that is like Henry Ruggs, a guy that's going to get on the outside and try and take the top off, but not a guy that's going to be a PPR type of monster. Another guy that's going to be a good best ball type of candidate, just because he has the ability to, catch a deep one and break one, and has the ability to do that once or twice a game. So he could pop a week, but not a guy that I'm looking to actively try and put on any of my fantasy rosters there. So Hunter Renfrow is on the Las Vegas Raiders as well. 61 last year as his fantasy finish, 56 receptions, 77 targets, 6. Your thoughts on Hunter Renfrow?
Before they drafted Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs, I had very high aspirations for Hunter Renfrow. Now that he's been relegated to the slot for all intents and purposes, he's occupying a lot of the same space as Darren Waller on a smaller frame. So I think what you saw last year is probably his cap, at least with this team. So for all intents and purposes, Hunter Renfrow is a guy that if you're looking for a dark dynasty sleeper, man, he's young enough that you can still, do that and kind of justify it a little bit. But he really provides no, I guess, consistent fantasy value in my book. I can find it other places with teams that have quarterbacks that are much more uh, accurate and involved in the passing game than what Derek Carr is.
Yeah, and that was one of those that, even looking back to 2019, where Hunter Renfrow gave us a lot of hope for 2020, where he had the big games even back then was when Darren Waller was hurt and was out, and that's where you saw him really just gobble up a ton of targets and really pop when it came to fantasy. But you hit the nail on the head, right? Hit the nail right on the head when you said that, if Darren Waller's in there, Hunter Renfrow is definitely capped, because Darren Waller becomes that first read on every short and intermediate type of target, and is big body and athletic. And Hunter Renfrow, that's smaller type of receiver out there, really just doesn't get the look there. And I see a lot of that continuing to be more of the same. So Hunter Renfrow is a guy that's, a flex type of play. If I've got some injury problems, a late round streamer type of thing, that's kind of where I see him for 2021. Bryan Edwards was another guy that they went out and spent some decent draft capital on last year, putting a 3rd round pick for him, and he had the 131st finish last year. Only 11 receptions on 15 targets for 193 through the air and 1 touchdowns. Any thoughts on Bryan Edwards?
I think Edwards again was he was plagued by injuries. He had ankle and foot issues all year long. He was coming off of a leg injury at South Carolina before he got drafted. That's part of the reason his draft stock fell the way that it did. Bryan Edwards is the build for what the Raiders need. 6'3", 215. Like, he's a guy who can play outside and then come across the middle and catch that ball. He was just dinged up. So the jury is very much still out for me on Bryan Edwards. I think he has the makeup and the pedigree to be a very serviceable wide receiver. I don't know that he's going to be a wide receiver one for any team. But if he can stay healthy and polish up a little bit, I do see him as a very valuable and consistent wide receiver 2 on a team down the stretch. But again, for fantasy purposes, I'm fading Raiders wide receivers. I want to see how these guys are going to develop and what they can actually do with a full year of offseason and reps with their quarterback and playbook, study sessions that are in the building and not just via Zoom, all the things. But out of all of the guys that we've talked about for the Raiders so far in the wide receiver room, Bryan Edwards is probably the guy that I have the most optimism for it being a consistently useful fantasy piece.
Well, and he's a guy too that you will probably see. You can probably take him super late when you're talking redraft. Dynasty's a different beast because of the him being young and that age. Everybody always kind of spends up a little bit to get young wide draft. Talking that way, he's a guy that you can pick up super late. That's worth a flyer on this year. Simply from the standpoint that you're going to spend, I don't know, probably a 15th or 16th round pick is about where I'd see him probably going. And at that point, you're throwing a little bit of some darts out there, but he's a guy that could deliver you some upside and could deliver you a little bit of pop. And so one of those that I would look at potentially trying to put him on there, as a late round flyer. And I think he may have some value there for 2021.
I'd agree with that. His very first game in the league, he had a 77% snap share, which coming in without zero preparation is pretty good, but that was also his best for the season. Then the injuries started creeping up. 62, 42, missed 4 games, then 2% because he got re-injured. 27, 15, 31, 19, 29, 31, 20, and 29. Like, the guy was never on the damn field. Now, part of that's because he couldn't get right. He couldn't get healthy. The treatment wasn't working for whatever reason. So if if he can get back to that 77% snap share or even improve upon that, you might absolutely find a value late in the draft, and a guy that's worth taking a flyer on. I think you're absolutely right with that. But just based off of what he showed in 2020, uh, I think I'd take my chances on Tim Patrick.
Fair enough. And that's actually probably a pretty good deal when you're talking about that. Another wide receiver that is in a crowded wide receiver room, and quarterback play is not necessarily at the elite level there either. So could be interesting. And either guy probably worth a late round flyer for sure. Let's go ahead and move on over to the tight end room, and they got a good one over there. Darren Waller finished as the tight end number 2. This is Kevin's favorite tight end, by the way, for everybody listening, and we'll tell that story here very soon. But Darren Waller last year, 107 receptions, 146 targets, 1,196 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Kevin, what are your thoughts on your favorite tight end, Darren Waller?
Darren Waller he's kind of that tight end break, right? And we talk about tiers for tight ends. You have Travis Kelce, you have George Kittle, and you have Darren Waller. And after that, there's the break. So if you are looking to pay up for tight end, if you're in a tight end premium league, or even if that's kind of how you want to make your roster composition, there's your break right there. It's those 3 guys, and then you need to wait 3 rounds before you even look at anybody else, in my opinion. Darren Waller is clearly the alpha in the entire receiving room for the Las Vegas Raiders. And he is a guy who, hot damn, like, Darren Waller struggled the first half of the season last year. And I say struggled. Darren Waller just didn't put up like elite numbers. He was serviceable. He was very good. He finished his tight end, in the top 12 of tight ends. So he was a tight end 1 throughout the season. Darren Waller, his 2 best games of the season. I had to face him both times, and he just ate my sack lunch in a receiver premium league. So in week 13, when he played the Jets, 17 targets, 13 receptions, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was the nail in my coffin. And then 2 weeks later, when playing the Chargers, it was 12 targets, 9 receptions, 150 yards, and another touchdown. I cussed him. I'm not going to lie. I cussed him because he crippled me. He's the reason I got bounced in the semis. He's the reason that I lost out on the number 1 seed. Like, Darren Waller was the bane of my existence. And it just so happened that the 2 weeks I went up against the team who had Darren Waller, he absolutely balled out and just blew up my fantasy hopes in 2020. So he might actually be a guy that I'm targeting this year, just so I don't have to play him or play against him. So we'll see, but clearly tight end 1. He is a top 3 option. He's only 28. So he's got some time left. He's not looking old and decrepit and everything else, because he's kind of a late bloomer. So there's still tread on those tires. Derek Carr is obviously very comfortable with Darren Waller. They put him out into space. He does go out wide. He'll play in line. He doesn't block a whole hell of a lot. So as far as having a tight end on a fantasy team, that's kind of what you want, right? You don't want the guy who's going to stay in line and block. You want the guy who's going to get out and catch passes. That's exactly how they use him. So you really can't go wrong there. Darren Waller is a great option at the tight end position. He just burned me so bad last year because he whooped my ass both times I played against him that, I'm not very happy with him at the moment.
Yeah, it was fun watching and texting you back and forth on some of those games, going through. Just Darren Waller is a guy that really had that breakout season in 2019 and hasn't looked back. Last year he was the consistency ranked tight end 2, and definitely during that back half of the season you were very happy that you had him on your fantasy roster. And he's a guy very much in that Travis Kelce type of mold that they are going to get him the ball early, often, and all the time. And so my question to you is, rank them right now going into 2021 for redraft purposes. Kelce, Kittle, and Waller. How do you rank in those 3?
I think Kelce's clearly 1 for me. He's been durable. He's a valuable piece of that Kansas City offense. And he's a guy that Mahomes looks to early and often in most cases. So I do think Kelce's clearly 1 for me. When healthy, Kittle is number 2. And Waller's number 3. But over the course of the last 2 seasons, where Darren Waller has been able to remain healthy, as opposed to the first few years in his career, Waller was dinged up a lot. The last 2 years he's been able to stay healthy, where Kittle's been dinged up. So that's kind of what tilts it, right? Like, dynasty wise, I'm going George Kittle. Redraft wise, man, I'd really have to sit there and think about that. Like, if I was dead set that I wanted to go tight end, or if I'm in a premium league, or what that looks like, I would really have to sit tight, because a lot of what they do is the same type of thing, right? They're clearly the top target in the passing game. Kittle, I think Kittle has proven to find the end zone a bit more often. Waller had the great year with the touchdowns in 2020, but up until then, he had 3 career touchdowns. That was it. 3 career touchdowns until 2020. So it's just kind of that proven track record. So I'd probably lean Kittle, but I would be okay with Waller as kind of that 3 2B, if you will, something like that. But definitely Kelce 1.
Okay. I'll to be if I'm looking at that, I would have a hard time going Kittle over Waller in 2021 for redraft purposes, and a couple of reasons why. One, you've got a San Francisco offense out there that most likely will either have a new quarterback to start the season, or a quarterback change that happens sometime during the season, depending upon what happens on Thursday. So kind of reason one that makes me a little leery when you've got a new quarterback coming into the system. 2, the George Kittle is a guy that really likes to play in the way it's was designed to play early on, where he loves getting out there, loves blocking, loves hitting guys. Darren Waller is a guy that likes catching the football and likes getting up the field. And when you look at some of that, he is going to be the primary target for Las Vegas, whereas George Kittle is going to kind of go in that rotation there, where Kyle Shanahan will ride the hot hand between whether it's Debo, whether it's Ayuk, whether it's Kittle out there in San Francisco. So I think for 2021, I'm probably going to be looking for Waller, simply because of the fact that I think he is going to be the clear-cut passing option number 1. He is very as well. He saw 40% of the target share for the red zone from the Raiders last year. So that would be my argument as to why to potentially go Waller over Kittle for redraft 2021. Cool. Let's go ahead and move on over to Derek Carr. And Derek Carr last year was a quarterback that finished at quarterback 13. He had 348 completions, 517 attempts, 3 passing touchdowns, put an additional 3 TDs on the board through the ground. What are your thoughts on Derek Carr?
He is a very unsexy pick at quarterback. Now, he's quite frankly, he's a guy that's not a bad version or a guy to have in a super flex league, right? Like he's a good QB2 to have in a super flex league. He's just not the sexy pick. Like it, he does a good job protecting the football. He doesn't turn it over a whole lot, so he tries to put the Raiders in the best position possible. But there are some games where he just has absolute stinkers, right? Like even when performing, 15 completions. Here's his game last year at Cleveland. So week 8, 24 or 15 of 24 for 111 yards. But you got the touchdown. So, I mean, so that is what it is. But, he saved part of it that game because he had 6 rushes for 41 yards. So he got just a couple extra points there and helped you out. But those are the games that I worry about. But then again, most quarterbacks that are going as QB2s and super flexes, all those guys have flaws. So I don't know that it's quite fair to just hammer him on those, because even Kirk Cousins has a couple games where he just looks like dog shit and then finds a way to squeeze into the top 12. So Derek Carr is a guy that generally he's going to go pretty late. Like he's a guy, as far as the quarterbacks are concerned, you can get him at like quarterback 22, 23, 24 even, and he'll finish probably QB 15 again. So there's some value there. You margin up on where you picked him to where you finished. So from that side of things, he's not a bad guy to target, especially in a super flex league. He's a guy that most folks are going to pass over. You can sit on him for a little bit, wait that extra round, maybe get some value at a skill position spot. Maybe it's because you're going for a tight end somewhere in there, and get Carr a little bit later and actually come out ahead from where you drafted him. Because I guarantee you he's not going to be drafted at QB 14. He's going to be drafted about 7 to 8 spots, 9 spots later, because the people hear the name Derek Carr and they instantly just go bleh. So again, value. That's where Derek Carr is important. That's where he's relevant in fantasy. He's a great second quarterback. He's a great guy to have for your super flex. So that way you don't have to spend 2 premium picks on a quarterback to fill those 2 roster spots. He's just, again, he's just not sexy.
Yeah. When you look at it last year, he was the 27th quarterback off the board at an average pick position of 165. So a guy that you were typically able to pick up in the 12th or 13th round. And it was, last 5 starting quarterbacks selected type of thing. And that's kind of his MO. He is going to be a guy that's going to be drafted super late. That's going to finish up in there. So a potential guy to look at and get some value out of. He's not win you a lot of weeks from the quarterback position. He's not going to necessarily lose you many weeks either. He's just kind of that ho-hum, average type of guy when it comes to fantasy, which there's a lot of value for that when you're talking super flex. If you're talking a single QB league, there's not a chance that I'm going to be looking to put him on my roster, but super flex, absolutely holding some value there, especially when you're talking about a guy you can draft in the 12th round and he's going to outperform some guys that were taken in the 8th round for quarterbacks.
How many Pro Bowls do you think Derek Carr's made? He's played 7 years. He's had a 7-year career to this point. How many Pro Bowls in his 7 years do you think he's made?
I'm going to say 2.
I'm close.
All right. I was thinking 3 and then I went 2 because I'm like, there's no way it's 3. Like there's no way
3.
It's almost half.
Now, everybody and their mother gets a Pro Bowl invite these days because of injuries and everything else. But still, a guy who's getting drafted, the 24th, 27th quarterback overall, finishing at QB 14 with 3 Pro Bowls. I mean, he's kind of niching himself out a very nice career. I'm not saying he's going to Canton, but he's just seeming to do the right things. And the Raiders, John Gruden and Mike Mayock both, who's at times don't pull punches. Like if they're not happy with you, they tell you that you're playing like a flaming bag of dog shit on the sidewalk. both haven't said that about Derek Carr. They keep saying that they're very happy with him. They don't have plans to move on from him. You know, all the things that they're supposed to say. And even through some of the games that he struggled, they didn't pull him and put Mariota in like a lot of folks thought that they might. So, you know, maybe we're not quite giving him enough credit, but I'm okay with that at this point, because now I can sit back and watch everyone pass him over, and I can implement my own game plan and put a guy who's very serviceable back into that spot and be okay.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're talking super flex there as well. He's a guy that you could potentially put on there. Not saying, forget potentially. He's a guy that you could put on there as your third quarterback on the roster that will absolutely outperform some other guys' second quarterback that they put on there, and you still took him way later. So yeah, I'm actually a little bit of a fan of Derek Carr heading into this season. For looking at Superflex, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that comes to play. But you're right, it was one this time last year when we saw Mariota go there. The socials and everybody else was very, very convinced that Mariota was going to either replace him or very much give him a competing role when it came to that starting job, and that just never really happened. It'll be interesting to see, because Derek Carr's been a guy that's been sacked a lot throughout his career, so it'll be interesting to see if they keep working on that offensive line, which would also help them establish a run game there as well. So establish a run game, a little bit better offensive line. We'll see what really the ceiling can hold for Derek Carr, I do believe. Kevin, any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, nothing too crazy tonight. Get your popcorn ready. The draft is coming, like we said at the beginning of the show, less than 48 hours away. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope springs eternal during draft season, right? It doesn't matter where you're drafting. You feel like the guy that you get, especially on Thursday night in round one, is going to be the biggest difference maker, and kind of solve all your woes. And it's fun. We're not going to get into the point that only 37% of the skill positions actually hit and are worth a shit that you draft in the first round, whereas 68% of the offensive linemen, and really it's closer to probably 72% of the offensive linemen hit. Keep that in mind if you're sassy and upset that your team took offensive line. Like, there's a better success rate. Your team's actually doing the right thing by going offensive line in the first round. So have fun. Please join us. Feel free to, banter back and forth with us. Tell us we're full of shit. Tell us you'll prove us wrong. Let us battle with you back and forth. It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun, guys. So stay tuned and happy drafting.
Yep, I love it. If you have not done so already, make sure that you download the SportsMe app. You can get it at getsportsme.com, or you can download it through the App Store or the Play Store out there. So make sure that you get that done before Thursday. Sign up. You can give Kevin a follow, me a follow over there. Kevin's at Kevin Good Old Boys FF. I'm at Derek Good Old Boys FF on the SportsMe. Make sure you follow us, because we've got a ton of fun that's going to happen draft night over there. We've got the live stream that is going to be coming to you on Thursday. We're kicking that off at 7:45 Eastern time, and we're going to be doing that with the Fantasy First Rounders live. We've got a ton of special guests, a ton of great analysis coming your way. So if you haven't done so already, hop on Twitter, hop on Twitch, hop on the YouTube. Give us a subscribe, give us a follow, ring those bells. Make sure you're getting all the notifications for when we go live on that one. You don't want to miss this. This will be a ton of fun. Give us a follow on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, at Good Old Boys FF, the YouTube channel, the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. For Kevin, I'm Derek. Have a good one. Alex will be back very soon. Be safe.